The topic of marriage has been a source of much debate over the past 10 or 15 years in the United States, specifically marriage equality for homosexuals. So I'm going to address that. Now, marriage in the view of the government is nothing more than a legal contract between two consenting adults, which confers specific rights and privileges to those individuals. It has nothing to do with religion. There's no test of faith, love, commitment, or fertility in order to acquire a legal marriage license. Plenty of people get married for convenience or for the financial benefits, or who never plan on having children, and the government doesn't question them on this. And that's, I bring that up because a lot of people often will bring children into the debate, but the simple fact is that married couples aren't required to have or raise children, and a lot of heterosexual couples don't. So to immediately bring children into the equation is dishonest and irrelevant. While some homosexual couples may want to raise families, some may not. So to bring children into the debate is really just taking away from the actual issue at hand. And additionally, gay couples are already living together and raising families, and nobody's stopping them from doing so. So the only thing that preventing marriage equality is doing is hurting those families and those children. And, in recent studies, they've shown that children raised by same-sex couples are not significantly worse off than those raised by opposite gender couples. In fact, some studies even suggest that children raised by same-sex couples may even fare better. And the reason they posit for this is because gay couples don't have any accidental children that they might be unprepared for. It's always planned. Now, arguments that posit that allowing homosexuals to marry will lead to the acceptance of bestiality and pedophilia are logically flawed, slippery slope fallacies, because children and non-conscious animals are incapable of consenting. Maybe non-conscious isn't the best phrase, but it's the best I could come up with at the time, I guess. But the fact is that they cannot consent. And when dealing with the law, consent is often a major factor, and that is included in marriage and sexual relationships. People often argue that it will lead to the acceptance of polygamy. Well, polygamy is actually already allowed. You can just only be legally married to one person. You can still have other spouses and live together as a communal family. Just the government will only recognize one of your marriages. Honestly, if the legal scenarios could be ironed out, I see no problem with allowing polygamy. Once again, the objections to that are pretty much going to be primarily based in religion. And they're going to be pretty similar to those against gay marriage. So it'd be pretty hypocritical for me to say, yeah, sure, homosexuals can get legally married, but polygamists, no, can't do that, because there's really no valid argument against it that you couldn't use against homosexuality. Now, another point I want to bring up is that Christianity did not invent marriage. And we all know that Christians are the bulk of the opposition to marriage equality in the United States. They do not get to own it or define it for everyone. Many non-Christian civilizations throughout history have had unions similar to marriage, including for same-sex couples. One example of this is Two-Spirit people of some Native American tribes. Another argument often presented is that homosexuality is unnatural. Well, I disagree wholeheartedly. Homosexuality is natural. Not only are human beings a part of nature, but in addition, homosexuality has been observed in hundreds of other mammalian species. In fact, in some species, such as bonobos, homosexuality may even increase your mating potential by offering access to a female for copulation. Now, current science suggests that hormonal levels during fetal development as well as epigenetic factors, are drivers of homosexuality. The science suggests that, yes, one can be born homosexual. It is not merely a choice. Now, homosexuality is inherently being attracted to people of the same sex. It's not just the act of intercourse with a member of the same sex. Sure, someone could choose to engage in that behavior. Someone who identifies as a heterosexual could engage in that behavior, and it would not make them a homosexual. It would make them a heterosexual who engaged in homosexual activity. So we have to make a distinction there, because homosexuality is something that you are born with. It is a disposition. They don't choose it any more than we choose to be straight. To make it seem like a choice is dishonest and disagrees with the science. Now, we know that the vast majority of opposition to homosexuality is rooted firmly in religion, but some of it is also just disgust. People just can't stand the thought of two men or two women having sex together. And, in fact, the majority of the time it really surrounds two men. You rarely hear anybody criticizing lesbians. It's always about sodomy and what gay men do. They just can't handle it. And, in all honesty, when I was a Christian, that's pretty much how I felt. It was just gross to me, and I pretty much just used religion as an excuse to be a bigot against that. And since then, I've completely gotten over it, and I realize that it doesn't bother me or affect me one way. Not at all. And not to mention the fact that plenty of heterosexual couples engage in sodomy, and you also rarely hear anybody making a stink about that. So it's just hypocritical, and it's just a reason for people to justify their bigotry, essentially. And the last point I want to make here is that sex, as far as gender, it's not binary. It's not just as simple as male or female. Yes, in most cases that is true, but we've created these somewhat arbitrary categories as to what constitutes a male or a female. But it doesn't work in all cases. There's people that have both ovaries and testes. So what sex are they? There are people who typically live as females who have the XXY genotype. So you can't simply say, well, someone has a Y chromosome, therefore they're a male. There is simply shades of gray. It's not all black and white. So if you're one of these individuals that has both sets of sexual organs, or an indeterminate genotype, how are you supposed to live? How are you supposed to know if you're being a homosexual or not? I mean, if homosexuality is such a terrible sin, why would God allow people to exist with this condition? Are they just supposed to completely abstain from sexual activities so as to not infuriate your benevolent God and suffer punishment for all eternity for making the wrong decision? I'm sorry, but it's just nonsensical, and it doesn't make any sense. So, if you have watched this video and you're still opposed to marriage equality, then please, by all means, explain to me where I've gone wrong. Because I've completely refuted all of the arguments, or at least all of the most frequently used ones, in opposition to it. There's just simply no logical reason that we should be having this battle. It is preposterous that we still have less than half of the states in the United States which allow marriage equality. Fortunately, things seem to be picking up the pace, and it looks like we're going to litigate this through the courts, and it's just going to get done, whether people want it to or not. And you can choose to be on the wrong side of history if you want, but just know that you are on the wrong side of history,